In exactly 3 weeks, Halloween will be upon us. I don't know about you, but I've created a spooky atmosphere both in and outside of the house. I've managed to scare family and friends, and admittedly even myself, with some of the decorations. Soon I hope to carve a few pumpkins, and will attempt to take a photo of my calico or black cat sitting in one. If I succeed, it will be featured in one of the coming videos. For now, here are 7 short scary stories. Enjoy. Every year, around the time of the autumn harvest when a blood moon takes the sky, someone vanishes in our community. They could be old, young, male or female, but they disappear. This has been going on for the last 30 years, according to my father, as part of some kind of ritual to appease the gods of the crows. You see, the crows used to come and destroy our crops, he says. They used to fly overhead like a blanket of black and swarm the fields until there was nothing left. But we stopped it. We prayed, he says. We prayed for an answer, and we got one. One person every year must disappear around this time, vanish as an offering to the crows. In tribute, every year we put up a scarecrow in the fields to remember them by. We decorate it with their favorite things and thank them for their sacrifice. Mother stays up all night sewing the scarecrow together, but she never lets me help make them, and Father never lets me help set them up. I've watched the crows flock to those scarecrows every year, and within days they've deflated and are just mounds of decorated cloth. I'm always allowed to help pull them down, but that's the worst part. They always smell like something died. Turn off your phone. That's so important, I'm going to say it again. 500 word limit be damned. Turn off your phone. It hates you anyway, I promise. If you happen to be reading this on your phone, stop and go through a lock-unlock cycle 3 times as quickly as you can. I'm not going to get technical yet, but that triggers a process that will buy us some time. If you're still reading, this next part will be uncomfortable. I'm going to need you to vomit. Seriously, stick your fingers down your throat and trigger 5 or 6 good heaves. You don't have to bring up everything, but it can't hurt. The main thing we're trying to do is induce a spasm in your upper esophagus. You should feel a lump sort of detach. Heave a few more times if you don't. Now spit it up. Doesn't look like much, does it? Pinkish, fleshy little lump with a few tendril-like things on the side. That's your god, believe it or not. Or it was, until very recently. You're going to have to burn it. Don't flush it or throw it away or feed it to your cat or anything. It's alive and quite capable of finding its way back home. Remember all that talk a few years ago about cell phones causing cancer? That's absolutely true, but the facts got garbled on the way out, some accidentally, by whistleblowers in less than need-to-know positions, some intentionally. But the spirit of the thing is true. Since the August 2013 iPhone update, your cell phone can absolutely cause cancer. In fact, that's the main reason you have one. The pieces are all there, freely available for you to tie together. We don't have the time or the space here, but you're smart enough to have found this resource in the first place. With any luck, you've got what we're calling the update thing out of your throat before it hooked into your brainstem. You'll sort it out. Look for flesh resonance, induced paranoia, nerve bundle atrophy and splicing, TEL coin, crypto interoperability. That is, unless you didn't follow my instructions. Or worse, you did, and there was nothing to spit up. You're a special kind of fucked at that point. The update thing has dug in, but it's not yet curled one of its slimy little fingers around your spinal cord. In a few days, you probably won't remember this conversation. We estimate about 23% of regular cell phone users are wholly a part of it now. There's no real hope for them. It's worth trying one more time. Turn off your phone, or cycle it 3 times. Jam your fingers into the meaty part of your throat. Heave, heave, heave. Now spit it up. How are you feeling, David? Every day with this question. Wake up, sun rises, brush teeth, get dressed, and then Dr. Kellogg asks how I'm feeling. Good, I guess. Not much changes from day to day. Dr. Kellogg nods and writes in his notepad. I've been discussing your case with Dr. Tran. She seems to believe that there's a possibility that you'll be fully functional within a year. Maybe even get back out there in the world, get set up in an apartment. How would that do for you? I reckon that would be great, but... Dr. Kellogg raises his eyebrows. I continue. But unless things have changed out there, I guess I feel like I'd be right back in here in a month. Ah, you still hold on to your fixation about the sin of modern life. I thought we were making progress with the aversion therapy. Memories of that therapy run through my head, and I suppress a shudder. Yeah, I guess, but it still hits, you know? I was raised a certain way. Right or wrong, I'm set in my ways. And society out there, I just can't stand it. It's too much. Maybe if I could get a job on the graveyard shift, where I didn't have to see too many people, something impersonal maybe, I think I could handle that. An interesting thought. I think you're onto something, David. If we can't change the man, change the circumstances. There's no such thing as cured, you know? Only functional and healthy, as opposed to repressed and dysfunctional. Dr. Kellogg goes on talking like that, in his infuriatingly calm and measured voice. Always so understanding. Always so kind and thoughtful and soothing. As he talks, he takes his lunchbox out from the mini fridge in his office. I tense up. Fuck no. Please no. I can't watch this again. Dr. Kellogg takes out a small plastic baggie of severed human fingers and opens it up, plucks one out, and begins to chew on the wet end. The noise and the smell are nauseating. I can't stop the telltale sweat from dripping down my face. Oh, dear God, he says with a look of shock. He jams the baggie into the lunchbox, out of sight. David, I am so sorry. That was so absent-minded of me to have done that. Please forgive me. I hadn't eaten breakfast, and I thought I'd get a small lunch in early, and... God, with your condition, that was inexcusable. I am so sorry. It's fine, I lie. Really. Just caught me off guard, that's all. I've got rats under the floorboards. So what, you might say? Look, the first thing you should know is that I've had this problem before. There's a rather large crawl space underneath our house, and as we found out over the years, the rats like to take up residence there during winter. Last year, my wife and I decided enough was enough and we called in this pest inspector. He was the real deal, brought in a bunch of fancy equipment to catch the buggers. When he was done, he slapped us a hefty bill and was on his way. Thank God, I had thought. To be honest, I've always had a pet hate for rats. Like any average Joe, I hate the filth and disease they bring. Most of all, though, I'm repulsed by their beady little black eyes, how they pointedly stare back at you, assessing whether you'd make a good next meal. Ugh. But this winter, the rats are back, and they've returned with a bloody vengeance. You can hear them underneath you, scurrying about down there, snarling and gnashing at each other. Sometimes they'll burst out from some crack in the wall and fly by your feet. My house feels more like a mental asylum than a home these days. In the past week, we've begun seeing dead ones all over the house. Dead rats. They'll turn up anywhere. In the laundry, in the kitchen, out in the backyard. Peculiarly, the bodies always have chunks taken out of them, as if they had ended up as a delicious rat kebab. I can only suspect that some of the filthy vermin had eaten their fellow rats after they had died, or maybe they'd killed them first and then eaten them. At night, I even get this weird feeling of being watched. In my imagination, there is a pair of beady eyes looking out from the dark, glistening. We are in panic mode. I've tried calling the pest inspector, but he's fully booked for the next month. This morning, a dead rat turned up in our bed and my wife totally lost it, screaming at me to get it fixed. So here I am today, toolkit out, pesticide and mouse traps at hand, crouched down and ready to tackle my worst nightmares. I'm getting the screwdriver out when I hear a very loud thud from below. That's odd, I think. I lean down very close and put my eye right next to the gap in the floorboards. My breathing is unusually shallow. I half expect to see a rat's eye looking up at me. What I see is worse. A man's eye is staring back. Have you ever traveled by bus late at night? The rhythmic lights from the oncoming traffic, the silent, sad whispering, but hopeful laughter from someone speaking with a long-distance partner over the phone behind you, the calming music in your ears, the warmth from your jacket you forgot to remove when you sat down, the dark fields, forests, and neighborhoods outside the misty window, the loneliness. You never travel by bus just for fun. No, you are headed somewhere. It could be home from that party, to one of your divorced parents. Home again, visiting a long-lost friend in another city. Going to the funeral of some relative you never met. You are never on a bus without reason. It's a pause from your life. It's a place to think. A place to cry. Somewhere to relax and to do nothing for a while. Just you and your thoughts. But whatever you do, no matter how hard you try to forget about the outside world, you are not alone. The bus isn't empty. There are always people there around you. Sometimes you could find yourself sitting right next to someone. Maybe it's your oldest friend. Maybe it's not. But whoever you are, whenever, the bus is never empty. Have you ever looked up while traveling by bus late at night? No, not just up to the roof. I mean, have you really looked? Have you seen the eyes? Do you see them? The passengers? Sometimes you do in the corner of your eye. They stare through the darkness, directly at you, always watching when you are not. Just outside of your vision they stand, longingly. When you fall asleep they are closer than ever, breathing the air you breathe out, always staring, tasting your warmth. They will always be there. Perhaps you notice them more often now after learning about them, staring at you in the corner of your eye. Listen to your favorite song, drink your coffee, eat your snack and sit comfortably. Audit the world outside the gloomed window, see the traffic lights fly past while accelerating through the darkness. Then, carefully, change your focus onto the reflection in the window. What do you see? Can you see them? In your peripheral, their gray faces, their black, hollow eyes. I bet you can. I know I can. Just whatever you do, never stare back. The thing that had been his wife was in the dining room. He sat in the bush, tightly grasping the cricket bat, his weapon, out of sight of the shambling masses and his former wife. He'd heard on the TV they retained some kind of knowledge from their past lives, the living dead. Now as he watched the husk of his love, and one of the others shovel meat into their mouths where they once ate together, he knew. Before she'd changed and the world had fallen to pieces, he, like most people, only knew one form of death. As a child, it had been the most frightening of things, the worst possible outcome of any situation, something to do anything to avoid. As he'd grown, his outlook had grayed and he had learned better. It was sad, yes, but it could not be helped, and so he viewed it as if only a long goodbye. He grieved those he lost as he did those who drifted or moved away, with the heavy heart absence creates, and the hope of seeing them soon. But there was no coming to terms with this. Knowing there was this thing masquerading as her, with eyes that looked right through him, seemingly no recollection of him and what they had been. He broke cover from the bush, a hand slipping to his pocket and the back door key he still possessed, making his way to the rear of what had been their home. He still remembered the day she told him she was changing. She insisted they parted, that he get on with his life. He'd protested at first, but she insisted. He'd let her stay in the house. The thought of her fending for herself on the streets was too much to bear. Since then, he'd squatted where he could, staying at each until he was run out by the shambling masses. While the changes were occurring, he had snuck back to see her. At first she'd let him in, if only briefly, but as it gripped her and her eyes grew more vacant, he stopped going in. He'd still talk to her through the letterbox for a while, but eventually the others prevented even that. Had he been any kind of man, he'd have done this months ago, but he held on to the seemingly unassailable hope that he'd be able to change her back. Before it had been cut off, he'd scoured the internet for ways to get her back, but he knew now that was impossible. Looking back, he saw the signs. The growing emotional detachment, the blank looks, avoiding physical contact. Looking forward, he saw only one solution. He unlocked the back door, slipped through the kitchen and into the dining room. The thing that had been his wife looked up and saw him. "Jamie? Not again. You know about the restraining order." He raised the bat, looking at her through tear-filled eyes, and swung. The day I found out my husband was cheating on me, with my best friend no less, I drowned in my tears. The day after, I filed for our divorce. 2 days later, my husband begged for me to cancel it. I didn't budge, then told him to leave and take his belongings. 3 days later, I talked to my best friend, convincing her that I understood, that it was okay. 4 days later, news came that in 3 months' time, they were going overseas. We bore no children to fight for custody. 5 days later, my husband came to my house and I had my closure. 6 days later, I invited my best friend for dinner. She was distraught over my husband, who seemingly disappeared. I assured her that they will be together forever. Earlier this day, she still hasn't found him. She thanked me for the wonderful steak, though, and might come for dinner again.